Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. This morning I woke up and I was watching the Today Show, and they had an interview with Dorsey Montgomery. He's the one African American juror in the Michael Slager case. He was also assigned to be the foreman for that jury. He gave us some insight into what happened in terms of deliberations, and I just wanted to spend some time today talking about this. One thing that was real important in his interview is he brought out the fact that it wasn't just an issue of one holdout juror. He said that there were 5 or 6 undecided jurors, and that they were hoping that that one holdout juror, that he would have changed his mind and perhaps that would persuade the other undecided jurors. So this situation is far worse than a lot of people thought. The fact that you had this many jurors who were undecided, and the fact that you had this one juror who said that he could not in good conscience find Michael Slager guilty. And he said that he could not and he will not change his mind. And my question is basic. My question is simple. How can anyone in their right mind not realize that Michael Slager murdered Walter Scott in cold blood? This jury deliberated for 4 days over 22 hours, deliberating about what is obvious and clear. Here you have a situation where an African American man is unarmed and he is running away from the police. He is far away from the police. But yet this police officer, Michael Slager, fired multiple shots into this brother's back, killing him. And after killing this brother, after shooting him multiple times, this cop put handcuffs on this brother. Handcuffs on his body. And I'm not sure if he died immediately when those shots were fired. If he did not die, he was in the process of dying, in the process of bleeding to death. And this man, Michael Slager, put those handcuffs on this brother. And not only that, this man went and grabbed a taser and threw it near Walter Scott's body. Threw it near Walter Scott's body. Planted that taser so that it would appear to be a justified shooting and killing of Walter Scott. That's what happened. During the trial, this man, Michael Slager, had no legitimate explanation as to why he dropped that taser near Walter Scott's body. This man said that he was in fear of his life, basically, and that he fired until the threat was no longer there, as he was trained to do. My question is, what threat was posed? How is there a threat when a man is running away from you unarmed? Now this man claims that he thought that Walter Scott had the taser in his hand when he was running away from Michael Slager, the officer. But yet after he shoots Walter Scott, Michael Slager returns to the original spot to grab that taser. So clearly and obviously, he did not think that Walter Scott had that taser because he immediately ran back to get the taser. And as he put the cuffs on Walter Scott, he didn't search Walter Scott for any weapons or anything like that. So it was clear and obvious that Walter Scott did not pose a threat to this officer. It was clear and obvious that this officer knew he didn't pose a threat. It was clear and obvious that this officer planted that gun, that taser gun, in order to make it appear as if this homicide, as if this murder was justified. But yet you had this jury. They couldn't get it. They couldn't see it. after spending 22 hours deliberating, after spending 4 days deliberating. And my question is simple. How in the hell couldn't they get it? What more evidence do these people need in order to convict this killer of killing a black man? What more do they need to see? What more evidence do they need? What more video evidence do they need? What more testimony do they need in order to convict? This situation is really disappointing. The only reason why I hold out any kind of hope at all is because the prosecutor has vowed to continue and file another case against this man, Michael Slager, to pursue another case against him. And also there are federal charges pending against him for violating Walter Scott's civil rights and for obstruction of justice. So that gives me some glimmer of hope. But when I see the fact that you had this many jurors who were undecided, there is no rational explanation for this. The only explanation that makes sense is racism. That's the only thing that makes sense. And during Dorsey Montgomery's interview, he downplayed the significance of race. And I find that to be very disappointing. He mentioned that race is an issue in society in general, and he said it may have played a factor, but he basically downplayed it. He said that he didn't see anything that would indicate that race was a significant factor. He also explained why this juror was holding out. Apparently, this juror thought that Michael Slager was defending himself. He actually thought this, according to Mr. Montgomery. That's what he thought. And when you look at the legal standard for shooting a fleeing felon, there is no way in hell that any rational person could come to the conclusion that Michael Slager was defending himself. According to the case of Tennessee versus Garner, in order for an officer to be able to use deadly force, it has to be necessary to prevent the escape of a fleeing felon, and that officer has to have probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of violence to the officer or the community. A significant threat of violence to the officer or the community. This is an unarmed man who is running from the officer. How in the hell could someone conclude that he posed some kind of significant threat to the officer or the community? We have to understand what this whole interaction was all about, how it began. This was a simple traffic stop for a broken tail light, for a broken brake light. That's what started this. It wasn't like this man was a suspected terrorist or a suspected bank robber or some suspected murderer. This is a man who stopped for a broken tail light. A man who ran from the police because he feared that he would be arrested for owing child support. This man did not pose any kind of significant threat to that officer or the community. And it is unfathomable. It is beyond my ability to grasp how any rational person could conclude that this man posed a threat to Michael Slager. And I just can't understand how this juror, this black man, could not see that this is all about race. We have to realize that this case took place in South Carolina, one of the most racist states in the country. A state until relatively recently flew the Confederate flag on its state grounds. A state that was the heart of the Confederacy. A state that has a history of slavery, a history of segregation, and a current problem of racism. That state. You always have to look at these things in context. And as I said in the live stream, the Confederate flag is a symbol of oppression. The Confederate flag is a symbol of slavery. The Confederate flag is a symbol of segregation. The Confederates fought to preserve and protect slavery. That flag is equivalent to a Nazi flag when it comes to African Americans. Thousands upon thousands of people died in the Civil War. The Confederates were traitors to this nation. The Confederates cost many people their lives. All those people died so that these people could preserve slavery. And during the Jim Crow era, they resurrected that Confederate flag. They used it as a rallying symbol against our basic human and civil rights. When people were trying to just go to school or go to a restaurant or just be able to exercise their right to vote, racists, segregationists would use that flag as a symbol of their protest. This is the state we're talking about. A state that has a history of discriminating against African American tourists. And I won't go into all the details about that, but you can check out my live stream. I talk about that during my live stream in that Google Hangout. I'll post links in the cards so people could check those out if you haven't seen it. But with all that rich or despicable history of racism, it's clear and obvious that race was a factor. If this officer was black and Walter Scott was white, without a doubt, there wouldn't have been 22 hours of deliberation. There wouldn't have been 4 days of deliberation. There wouldn't have been any holdout jurors. That officer would have been found guilty. That's just a fact. It's just a fact. And I noticed during the interview, Mr. Montgomery said that at first he was willing to convict for murder, and then after considering the evidence, he brought down the charge to manslaughter because he said that this man did not act with malice. What can be more malicious than someone shooting an unarmed man who's far away in his back as he runs away? What can be more malicious than a man trying to plant a taser gun near Walter Scott's body in order to cover up a crime? Nothing is more malicious than that. This is not manslaughter. This is murder. And I hope and I pray that there is justice for Walter Scott. Because enough is enough. This is a part of a pattern that we see around this country, where these police murder black people with impunity. And I'm going to keep citing it. I'm going to keep citing the statistics. African Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police, shot and killed by the police, than white people are. Black men only make up 6% of the population in the United States, but yet they account for 40% of the unarmed people killed by the police. This is according to a study or a report that was issued by the Washington Post. I will post a link in the description box so that you can read that for yourself. Also, I will post links to the interviews with Mr. Montgomery so that you can check those out for yourself and judge them for yourself. But one other thing that I must mention before I close out is the fact that they chose one black person for this jury. One black person. I don't understand why more black people weren't on that jury. And it just brings me back to a point that I mentioned in my solutions video. We have to serve on these juries. We have to take jury duty seriously because we have the potential to make a difference in cases like this. We can make a difference. We can make our voices heard, and we can render justice for our people. And often, in order to get on these juries, people have to register to vote. They take names from the list of people who have registered to vote and the list of people who actually vote. Also, they get records from departments of motor vehicles when people obtain their driver's license or update their information. They also get jurors from that pool as well. But it is important for us to vote so that we can get on these juries. In my other video, I go into much more detail, but that point cannot be overemphasized. That point cannot be emphasized enough. That must be stressed. We need to be on these juries if we want to make a difference. And I am really disappointed that the one black man, the one black person that was on that jury appears to be a weak black man, an effeminate black man. A black man that was easily swayed, even though he still voted to convict this man of manslaughter. But he seems like he was a weak person. He didn't seem like a strong person, at least according to the interviews that I've watched. His demeanor did not project strength. We need strong, outspoken people in these jury rooms to bring home these cases. And I hope that justice is rendered when this case is filed again, when it's tried again on the state level and the federal level. Because what we have right here is injustice. The fact that you had this evidence, this videotape, and these people weren't able to decide, that's outrageous to me. That makes no sense to me. It seems like they would be more likely to convict if Walter Scott was white, or if Walter Scott was some kind of animal, a dog or a cat or a gorilla. They would be more compassionate towards him. But when you're black in this society, your life means nothing.